stunning looks than swift.
It will take a miracle beyond Maxwell proportions for us to not see an India-New Zealand semi-final for the second edition running at the Men's ODI World Cup. New Zealand have all but booked their passage into the knockout rounds with a resounding victory over Sri Lanka in Bengaluru, which means Sri Lanka end their campaign with 7 defeats. It gives us a lot to look back upon on Maruti Suzuki Arena. Presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday, powered by Qatar Airways. Before we bring our guests in, let's get a quick look at the match summary and how things progressed. Sri Lanka, after being asked to bat, were bowled out for 171. That they lasted 46.4 overs, was down to their tail because they were 105 for 7 in 18.3 overs. It took the effort of Mahesh Theekshana to see the innings last 47 overs. Trent Boult starred in the power play with 3 wickets, and Mitchell Santner bowled 10 impeccable overs, 2 for 22. The chase, New Zealand began right from the word go. They were looking to make sure that that net run rate is not a point of contention at any stage. The openers set them up, both Conway and Ravindra with quick-fire 40s, and although they did lose wickets towards the end, they managed to keep the run rate above 7 and eventually were home with more than 26 overs to spare and 5 wickets in hand. So let's bring in Steve Harmison, who's here in our studios, and Farveez Maharoof, who joins us on link for one last time this evening. Good evening, gentlemen. Job done, and job done as thoroughly and resoundingly as New Zealand could have expected.
Yeah, absolutely. We expect them to come out all guns blazing, going for that big win to put not just sort of 1 foot, but more or less 2 foot. I think they've got 1 foot and 4 toes, you said, they were in the semi-final. I think they're there now. New Zealand, it's going to take something extraordinary for Pakistan or Afghanistan to get anywhere near New Zealand, and they did it in some style. I thought the 2 openers came out and put the Sri Lanka bowlers under extreme pressure, and then as they, both Ravindra and Conway got dismissed, Mitchell came out and played a beautiful innings, 31 balls for 43, just kept taking the game away from Sri Lanka, and there was a little fight, there was a little huff and puff, and Matthew showed what a champion cricketer and champion competitor that he is in that middle period. But like all in all, the damage was done with a bat for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, we didn't think there was much left in the game at half-time, did we, Farveez? But your overall assessment on this win and on this result, and the margin in particular, which also damages Sri Lanka's hopes of finishing in the top 8.
As long as New Zealand was going for it, it's going to be one way. Either New Zealand is going to win it with ease, or else Sri Lanka, if they bowl well and New Zealand bat badly, Sri Lanka would have had a chance. But the latter was going to be impossible. As we all know, under lights at Chinnaswamy Stadium, it's going to be a good batting pitch, and it proved to be. But overall, it's just agony which finished for Sri Lanka. I got to say that, because looking at the last 4 games, how things have panned out after the England game at the very stadium in Bengaluru. I think Sri Lanka lost to 3 Asian counterparts, and then this game, they wanted to finish on a high, but the batting let them down pretty badly, and as expected, New Zealand just cruised through. And yes, there was some fight in the middle, especially when Angelo Matthews picked up a couple of wickets. He just made sure that there was some fight, and I saw some body language which was quite positive. But at this level, playing international cricket, I just don't think it's good enough at this level, playing against a top quality side.
Yeah, there will be a lot more to dissect about not just Sri Lanka's performance here, but on a broader level as their World Cup campaign comes to an end. Let's take a look at the points table, because there's implications, as we've mentioned through the day, at both ends of the table. New Zealand don't quite get the queue confirmed, but with 10 points and the net run rate they have, just to make it amply clear, for Pakistan to overtake New Zealand on net run rate, they will need a 287 run win against England, or if they are chasing and England score 150, Pakistan will have to chase it in 3.4 overs. I'd imagine those scenarios are unlikely, Steve.
Well, I would have said anything's possible the way this England side's playing, but not, that is extreme. That is really extreme. Sorry, Josh Butler and the boys for making that joke. But look, I think Pakistan can blame themselves for not qualifying if they don't qualify. New Zealand hiccuped in the middle when their side was decimated by injuries. But a quality side like New Zealand, you can never write them off. And I think just quietly, I think of the three teams that are in the semi-finals with India, I've got a funny feeling India is the one team that didn't want to play was New Zealand because of the character that New Zealand have. They're now all coming back to fitness. I wouldn't say they're all in prime form, but on the big stage, India and New Zealand have been here before. All the pressure is now on India, and Indian cricketers are so used to playing under pressure, so I don't think that will harm them too much. But playing at the Wankhede against New Zealand, when New Zealand beat them the last time in 2019 in the semi-final, I think if India had one side that didn't want to play in the semi-final, I think out of the four, I think it would be New Zealand that didn't want to play. So it'll be interesting to see how that game develops.
We're just going to bring up that points table again for the implications for Sri Lanka, because they're in that four-way race for Champions Trophy qualification, and the damage of the net run rate, Farveez, is what could prove so costly, because just because of that gulf that's created now, they find themselves in a position where even if England and Bangladesh were to lose their last two games but not lose it by big enough margins, Sri Lanka will miss out by finishing outside the top 8.
I think Sri Lanka has to blame themselves for the effort in the last 4 games. That's why they are running around the 9th mark, and the net run rate supposed to, it was supposed to be good with the end of the 5th match, but ever since after the England game, it's just Sri Lanka went through a shocking 4 games where it's just gone to -1. And, the pride was to get through somehow to play the Champions Trophy. Of course, we've all been in that situation where Champions Trophy has its own history and pride to win it somehow. And unfortunately for Sri Lanka, it's looking bleak, especially the way things have panned out. And as I said, luck has run out as well for Sri Lanka, unfortunately. And if in case Sri Lanka loses it and misses out, I think they will have to blame themselves, nobody else.
Right, so it's probably the right point to just look back at Sri Lanka's campaign. It finishes with them losing 7 out of 9. That's the most losses Sri Lanka have endured in a single edition of the Men's ODI World Cup. Farveez, when you look back from start to finish, as damning as that statistic is, where to you did Sri Lanka falter through the campaign?
I think right throughout the batting has been the problem. I mean, if you take a look at the first game, I thought South Africa just outbatted Sri Lanka. Apart from that game, every other game, Sri Lanka was undone by batsmen. I mean, if you even look at the second game against Pakistan, there was a good start. Easily could have scored about 375, but they finished around 340, something like that. Ended up losing that game. And one against Netherlands, that was a decent batting effort to win that game, because under pressure, chasing a 260 runs was not easy in a tricky Lucknow pitch. They did that somehow. And the game they won against England, just chasing 140 on a good batting track at Bengaluru, wasn't that an issue. So all 4 those games, I thought the batting was decent. But apart from that, I think they have had a shocker as batsmen. As a group, they will be question marks asked about the attitude in some of the games. And for example, the game against Afghanistan, the way they batted without any intent, letting the spinners bowl in the middle overs, and all of a sudden a collapse happens. So, overall, I think batting has been a biggest letdown in this World Cup, and hence is finishing on the 9th at the moment, and it's just looking bad and worst, finishing at 9-9. And if you ask me the question, beginning of the World Cup, if Sri Lanka had any chance of, winning it or surprising few teams, I would have said I have a little bit of hopes, because in World Cup, Sri Lanka have always done well and beaten bigger teams. And leading up to the World Cup, they had to play the qualification round and, played some decent cricket there, won it. But leading into this, I just had a glimmer of a hope, thinking that in the past, in the World Cups, Sri Lankan teams have always done well. But, this young team just couldn't take that tag forward, which is very unfortunate for a nation like Sri Lanka, because its proud history, especially in World Cups, been having a big stain of losing 7 games in 9 occasions. Just a shocker, if you ask me.
When we make the overall assessment from the outside, Steve, how much consideration would you make to the fact that this has been an ODI side that has had its troubles? They only made it to the World Cup through the qualifiers. When you consider that and then the injuries before and during the campaign, how much does that affect your overall assessment?
Yeah, it has to have some effect. Losing your captain after 2 games, that's a big blow. Going through 19 players throughout the competition, there's another where you can have an excuse for Sri Lanka. But I think what's been said, what Farveez has been saying, is the batting order has been making the same mistakes. And when your batting order makes the same mistake after mistake after mistake, they're not learning. And that for me is something, yes, it's a relatively young side, but it's a side that's been built and put together over the course of the last 2 years. It's a side that won the Asia Cup. It's a side that went to Harare and won, which was a pressurised situation because they were the big boys in a small pool where you'd expect them to learn from the mistakes quicker than what they've actually done here. So I think there are excuses that you can look at, but I think overall, I think that the manner of their defeats and the manner of some of the batters' dismissals over the course of 9 games makes you probably, if you're Chris Silverwood, scratch your head and think, how have we got into this position? Because we've got good batters, we've got good players, we've been in Asia Cups where we've played Pakistan, India in big pressurised situations. But unfortunately, when we come to this World Cup, we've probably let ourselves down.
Farveez, I know it was a big loss to come into the tournament without Wanindu Hasaranga, the prime spinner, but how much of a factor was it just how ineffective the Sri Lankan spin attack proved to be, especially someone like a Mahesh Theekshana for most of the campaign?
Wanindu Hasaranga was a massive miss for Sri Lanka. Not only his bowling, I think his presence in the team as an all-rounder, and he's a leader. He motivates the team, and he's somebody that I respect a lot. The way he plays the game, plays it hard, plays it fair. So he was a big miss for Sri Lanka for sure. And Mahesh Theekshana, ever since he had that injury during Asia Cup, made a comeback to this World Cup. I don't think he has hit the steps where he usually does with his bowling. I thought he was decent enough, but lead an attack in a World Cup, I thought he lacked a bit of skills and lacked a bit of form. Maybe because he's coming after injury and less match practices, that can be a reason. And when it comes to the other spinner, Dhananjay de Silva has had a quite a low profile tournament as well. He's an off spinner who has done really well in the past as a bowler. Sometimes when he keeps failing with the bat, he keeps the place in the team as a bowler. So even him in this tournament with the ball has not shown that much. And young Dunit Wellalage hasn't had a big opportunity to play some games. So I think when it comes to World Cup games, experienced players like the likes of Dhananjay de Silva as a leader got to step up, but unfortunately he hasn't had a very quiet World Cup. So there are so many reasons, so many areas that I can pinpoint on. But the reality is, as simple as not good enough at this level to compete against the top eight teams in the world. And Netherlands and Sri Lanka came through the qualifying rounds. That was a relatively high pressure situation. Pitchers in Zimbabwe were not that great when it comes to batting going forward. But when you're playing with the big boys, you need to up the game. And unfortunately, Sri Lanka did up the game in certain occasions. But to remain there and box punch to punch, and to do that, I don't think Sri Lanka had the firepower to match that at all. Looking at how they batted, especially because same mistakes were kept repeating, and that hurted Sri Lanka much more. And the injuries list kept growing as well. And you change the captain in the middle of the tournament, and the player was scoring runs ever since he got the captaincy. Failed the next 7 games. So there are so many problems, questions I could have easily pinpointed, but in general, I think it's just not good enough at this level.
In terms of positives, Dilshan Madhushankar will stand tall, just above the rest of the pack. What else? Yeah,
Madhushankar, you'd say he's the biggest positive that Sri Lankan cricket have got to hope for going forward. Young man who's he stood tall in this tournament and kept them in situations or put them in winning positions when they did win the game. But apart from that, Sri Lanka batted beautifully in the last game to get 100. It was a fantastic 100. you could pinpoint moments where there's been positives, but I think during a World Cup campaign, when you've got to play 9 games, you want a level of consistency. And unfortunately, the consistency for Sri Lanka, they started quite well at the top when in the first couple of games, then a drop off. In the middle order, we touched on at the start of the show, 4 players had scored more than 220 runs. That tells you there's been moments. But unfortunately, when it comes to 9 games, trying to play against the best teams in the world, you need a level of consistency. For me, the only person that's been consistent in this tournament is Madhushanka.
Farveez, going forward, we know that there will be an inquiry, there might be a raft of changes. How do you see things panning out? Starting firstly with the captain. Does Dasun Shanaka continue as captain of this ODI setup?
I think there is more issues going on, not only on the cricketing front, but outside as well with the administration. There's so many dramas happening off the field, which has to be settled down first before even thinking of trying to have the post-mortem of what happened in the World Cup. So I think the management will do that, as well as the administration at the moment will do that. They probably will go through thoroughly what has exactly happened, and probably within 2-3 weeks, I think decisions will be taken. I think decision has to be taken as well. Some of them, even from the players front, from the management front. I mean, you don't perform in a high-profile tournament and you keep consistently failing, something has to give up. So I reckon within the next 2 to 3 weeks, some harsh decision has to be made. That's the betterment of cricket. That's what cricket is all about. We've all seen in the past as well. When you don't do well, obviously the criticism will have to be faced and certain actions to be taken. And I see it happening in the future, hopefully within 2-3 weeks. And a word about Dasun Shanaka's captaincy. Yes, just could play a couple of games, and that's a pretty interesting one. How the administrations are going to go forward, whether they're happy to go forward with him as white ball captain, or they would like to stick to Kusal Mendis. That's some dilemma that the new set of selectors, if they come, or the same selectors remain, that's something will be high in the agenda when the program happens. So it's interesting 2-3 weeks coming up when it comes to Sri Lanka cricket, unfortunately.
Yeah, there will be a lot of questions. Hopefully Sri Lanka find the answers, at least the ones that matter on the cricket field, for them to be more of a force going ahead. Let's look at New Zealand. They are more than likely to make the knockouts, as we've discussed. A game that helps them tick a lot of boxes. Almost everything we spoke about in the build-up to the game that might not have been working, say a Bolt in the power play or Santner, it clicked, so you feel like it gives them the best space, already playing their best 11 going into the knockout rounds. Yeah,
it's probably the first game out of the 9 they've had their best 11 together, and it's a perfect game. It's literally the perfect storm for New Zealand. They play a game where they all get a decent run out. They don't have to exert themselves 50 overs against 50 overs, where they have to have a long time in the field, in the warm, in the sunshine, to take a great deal out of their body. It looks as though they've all got through unscathed, relatively unscathed. Devin Conway got a little bang on the hand, and they all had a little bit of a knock. 45 for Conway, 42 for Ravindra, 43 for Mitchell. Kane looked in decent form until Andrew Matthews got him out, and Kane Williamson he's a big time player, so that'll not worry them going into a World Cup semi-final. So all in all, the bowlers, they had a decent run out. They all got 10 inside them. Saudi got another 8 inside him. You could argue it was the perfect run out for New Zealand, where they got their A team out. They didn't have to exert themselves too much. They put pressure on and threw the punches, big punches, early in the contest, and let the rest of the game just be total control and dominance, and didn't get out of third gear. So from that, you'd think that is a beautiful way to go into a knockout semi-final, especially against the big boys in India.
Yeah, and it just changes the momentum too, because New Zealand had been on a run of 4 losses, having started the tournament with 4 wins. Farveez, when you look at New Zealand from an opponent's point of view, what are the areas to exploit when you come up against them in the knockout rounds?
I think they got all the bases covered. I think one area could be the 5th bowling option. That's something that probably India will try and target and try and hurt New Zealand pretty much, because apart from Santner, Ferguson, Saudi bowl, I can see them bowling their 40 overs. And that 10 overs, which is Ravindra with Glenn Phillips, or maybe Daryl Mitchell. Those are the 10 overs that I'm pretty sure India will target. So that's something that they need to figure out, or most probably try and get those 10 overs out of the way as soon as possible. So that's something that tactically India could hurt. In batting, I think wicket of Devon Convoy, that's going to be very important. He's somebody who likes to play that longer innings, and he can be aggressive when he in the bowling is good. He could bog down as well. So he's a wicket that India could target early on, along with Kane Williamson. We all know who Kane is when it comes to big occasions. And young Ravindra, what a fantastic tournament he has had so far. So it's going to be a great game. I see it as a crunch game where, as Steve said before, if India wanted to avoid some team in this tournament, that's probably be New Zealand with their experience playing in these big occasions, and they got their X factors as well. And in a good pitch in Wankhede Stadium, they could hurt India. So I think it's a game. It's a game where nerves, whoever holds a nerve, will go through, and those are the little areas. If New Zealand can brush up, they could really give a good fight to a strong Indian team.
All right, that should just about do it from us for this one. Farveez, we will take this opportunity to thank you for your time and company. It's always such a pleasure having you with us on our coverage on ESPN Cricinfo. I thank you on behalf of the entire team for your company through this World Cup, and wish you well and hope to see you very, very soon. And Steve...
Thank you, Yash. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers. And Steve, you're back in the hot seat again.
Yes, back tomorrow, which will be another great game, hopefully.
Yes. So Friday is Afghanistan against South Africa. That's the game, and Steve Harmison will be here in the studios. But before that, the ESPN Cricinfo mobile app will have you covered with all the post-match reactions, the thoughts from the Sri Lankan camp as they look back. The coach came to the press conference, as well as the thoughts from the skipper. All of that on the ESPN Cricinfo mobile app. Be sure to download it, and be sure to be back here just before the toss. We'll be live 5 minutes before the toss on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday, powered by Qatar Airways.
Stunning looks, then swift,